Here I am back again. My dog started barking and I had to stop it. But where we were when I left off was talking about this dicky. All right, again, they had to make do with what they had. If you had some old curtains that you could use for clothes, or an old tablecloth, or say, hey, I've got two tablecloths. I don't need two, I only need one. And use that tablecloth and its pretty design and make a dress or some other article of clothing, a blouse or whatever. Make something practical. This is one of my mom's old tablecloths, and I think I showed it to you last time briefly. And you could also make uh, all my clothes or whatever, but you could make a pretty dress out of a tablecloth too. And I showed you that last time too. This one right here. And my mom had a dish towel made out of something very similar to this, which I just had here somewhere. If I find it, I'll show you. So many things laying around here by me to show you that I can't keep track of them all. But anyway, the point is, you made do with what you had, and I have a feeling that my mom made that dish towel out of a tablecloth because she needed a dish towel and she didn't need an extra tablecloth. And you just made do with what you had. You know, things that nowadays we think, well, I need 3 of these and 5 of these. Back then you said, I need 1 of those. How about a sweater? This is an example of a sweater that has a whole bunch of pulls in it because my dog, as nice as she is, likes to jump up on me sometimes. And look at all this. Her nails have pulled out of my sweater. So it's not very pretty anymore. And back then, if I had a sweater like that, or one that had some tears or worn out areas in it, I could take my knitting needles and take it all apart until it was a pile of yarn again, roll it all up into a yarn ball, and make a new sweater. A sweater that maybe will fit my daughter, or my son, or a different style of sweater for myself, but reusing. Not saying, this sweater is old, I'm going to throw it away, but using it again for a practical purpose. Another sweater, or a hat, or scarf, or mittens, all the whole set from one sweater. There were some fun things that you could do if you really put your mind to it. Another clothing item, nylons. Now, you probably don't see these very much anymore. I have worn them in my lifetime, not as much anymore. These are nylons, so you can see my finger through these. Ladies used to wear these on their legs, and especially, remember, in Christian's times, the dresses were very long. Then, the hemlines shortened. They got shorter and shorter until by the time of the 40s, Molly's time, the dresses are just below the knee. So your legs are hanging out. You need a covering on them. And because I told you about socks not being as available, because you needed the fabric, nylons, which were used with dresses, were not as available because they were made out of nylon and also silk at that time. And that was used for parachutes during the war. You know, if you have to parachute out of an airplane because the airplane's in trouble, or if you're trying to land in a certain spot in a different country, you need that parachute to help you jump out of the plane. And so we didn't need nylons. We had to make do. And so women wore pants more, like I alluded to. Dresses didn't have as much extra frills on them, and shirts and coats and everything. Remember, sometimes we have cuffs on our coats and shirts and whatever. No cuffs now because that would mean extra fabric. No extra flourishes like ruffles and stuff on our skirts and dresses and blouses. Rick-rack, which you've probably seen before, that could be used to trim a little bit. Maybe not on your dicky, but I'm just showing you how it looks nice on a dark color on a light background. And you'll see in one of the Molly books, if you read them through, which I hope you're keeping to read them because they're good books. The first book, I don't like all the arguing going on in that book at the beginning. But as the book moves on, you see some good storytelling. But Molly has a birthday dress that has some rick-rack on it, and that was allowed, but no extra ruffles because that's fabric to make a ruffle sewn onto like a sleeve or a collar or a dress or whatever. So all of these things was to help the war effort, to save fabric and make it available for them. for the war, for the soldiers, and for their needs. Another thing that I needed to tell you about was zippers. Zippers were made out of metal back then. Now we have some other materials sometimes for zippers, but because zippers were metal and it was needed for the war, here's an example of a Girl Scout uniform at the time that used to be made of zipper down the front. I mean, that was the way they opened it. That was taken away. No more zippers were put in the uniforms, and you can see she has buttons. Buttons were a better way to make use of the situation they were in. And here's an outfit that looks like a uniform. And I was saying the outfits are more trimmed and at that time. Here's an example of a outfit that was very common then, to wear a skirt with straps on it, like a little, almost like overalls in a way, but it's like a jumper. Then you can make the straps longer as the girl gets taller, just like you can lower the hem, like make the dress longer. So there was a lot of things they could do. There's a picture of nylons again, like I just talked to you about. A lot of things you could do to help out with the fabric problem during the war. Another thing that they worked on to save during that time were, and one other thing I wanted to mention, on that same thing with that jumper I just showed you, you could do what they did, mix and match a lot. Say you have 3 skirts and 3 blouses, and you just mix and match them. One day you wear the white shirt with the plaid skirt jumper thing like I'm showing you here. Maybe the next day you wear that same shirt but with a green skirt. And maybe the next day you have a pink shirt and you wear it with your green skirt, and you just mix and match those 3 tops and 3 skirts, and you have enough to keep you dressed and looking, just fine, without having to have a ton of outfits. You made do with what you had for the war effort. Okay, wow, we have covered a lot of this stuff, and I'm glad. I'm going to move on to some other things that they did to save during the war, and that was something to do with our food situation. There were some food items that were scarce. Scarce meaning they didn't have as much of it because it had to go to the soldiers. It had to we had to feed our soldiers and keep them strong and healthy. And all of the people that were involved in the war effort, there were some women involved as well, and people on the home front working in offices to help overseas. Everything was for the war effort. You're going to hear that phrase a lot. Well, what I was going to show you a picture, and as I'm talking, I will show you a picture of, get all my books here, they're all over the place. We did something called rationing then. Here's a picture. It's hard to see. I have some ration coupons, which I looked for today and I could not find, but my dad had saved some from the war. This is hard to see, but it's a war, what does it say on it? War Ration Book 4. Okay. This is old and yellowed, but it was a book, and there were coupons inside, and when you went shopping, you had to take that with you. You could not go to the store with just money. You had to also have your ration coupons, and that is because there were several items that were rationed that you could not get if you went there and said, here's my money, and they said, wait, this is butter, this is cheese, eggs, whatever. These are rationed items, ma'am. You cannot pay with just money. I have to have your ration coupons. And you'd have to go home and get them. Because there wasn't enough milk, butter, cheese, things like that to go around. So you were only given a certain amount per month. So say if you get a pound of butter a month, that's 4, if you are used to getting sticks of butter, that's 4 sticks of butter. You're not going to use it all in 1 week, are you? Say it takes 2 sticks of butter to make a big batch of chocolate chip cookies. Say you do that the first week, and then one night you had rolls and biscuits or something like that for dinner, and your whole family passed the butter around and you used another stick of butter. And then your mom was cooking and she wanted to add butter to some of her vegetables and to another recipe, and when the week was over you had no butter left and 3 weeks of the month left. Now would that have been a good plan? Nah. So they had to learn how to make do and only use a little bit at a time. So maybe if they were having rolls or bread or something like that for dinner, Mom would put a little piece of butter out and say, here, these couple of tablespoons of butter are to be shared. All of you just take a little bit and pass it around. so that we have enough. And when she made recipes, she tried to use as little as possible so that she could stretch those 4 sticks of butter through the whole month. The same with cheese, milk, eggs, coffee, meat, canned goods. A lot of things were rationed because we had to have enough for everyone. And we had to have enough to help for the war effort, to help others, so that our men and women could get the right food to eat. So there's a couple things you can also do at home. Besides, if you don't get as much at the grocery store, what can you do at home in your yard? You can grow a garden. Now in kids' time, we talked about how they grew gardens to grow vegetables so that they would have more food, because food was hard to come by then too. And when they did the gardens, that same practice that really was pushed again during World War II, and they called them victory gardens. In fact, there was a man from St. Charles, Mr. Norris, who was assigned to be in charge of the whole victory garden effort. And they estimate that 20 million Americans participated in this. And they would take their front yard, their backyard, their side yard, their rooftop if it was flat, their, whatever, an empty lot at the end of the street. Maybe a bunch of neighbors would plant some gardens in there, and they would grow, you name it, every vegetable. And they would share with each other. They'd have like a co-op, just like we have in homeschool, where one family says, hey, I grew a bunch of carrots, I'll give you some carrots for your beans, or I'll give you some potatoes for your tomatoes, or whatever. So everybody got enough vegetables for their family. And then another thing you could do would be to can them in jars. We call it canning, but it's in a jar. Here's an example of some pickles in a jar, which my husband did here, not today, another day. But you would take cucumbers, that's what pickles are, tomatoes, peaches, whatever you had from fruit trees, from gardens, from berry bushes, and you would can them too, so that in the cold months when you can't have a garden, or on the days when you just don't have as much food in your house because you've used some of your ration tickets and you're just getting by, then you can pull a canned jar of something off your shelf. And there was books like this. This is my mom's, that told you, and cookbooks had this too, how to can and then freeze also some of your things. Now freezers were very small back then, and refrigerators, we'll talk about that another time, so you couldn't put a whole lot in there. Canning was more used. Okay, so yes, so there are a lot of things you could grow in your yard. You could can stuff. You had to make do. And sugar was another thing that was rationed, so there wasn't as many sweets, not as much candy and cookies, so you just had to make do. And when your mom made you a plate of food for dinner and you don't like something on it, you weren't supposed to throw that away. That's wasting. That's hurting another person by throwing it away. I have a picture here that says, food is a weapon. Don't waste it. Buy wisely, cook carefully, and eat it all. Now, in the first Molly book, she doesn't eat all her turnips, does she? But when she does eat them later, it's because what? Because Mom came home and put some special spice on it, and that made it, the cinnamon made it taste so good. And that's what you did. Moms would try to make things tasty, maybe try something different, maybe mix a couple things together that she wouldn't normally do, or add a spice, or, whatever. And moms had to be creative, and that's what they did. So those are some more ways that we saved money, and what we call rationing, making sure everybody has just their amount. Now, we're going through a time right now where we're running out of things like toilet paper, paper towels, wipes, liquid soap, regular soap, whatever, because of the coronavirus. And so you're getting an idea of that. And some stores are starting to do that. We don't have ration coupons or books, but they're starting to say a limit of 1 or 2 of some item. And it gives you a little peek at what they went through during World War II. This time there's some similarities. I'm going to continue on the next video.